boat arrival represented another policy failure. Well, this is the single biggest policy failure on this failed Prime Minister's watch when it comes to border protection. It brings to over 7,500 people, the number that have arrived this year, a new record year, and we're not even in September yet. It brings to over 22,000 the number that have turned up since this government abolished the policies that worked and have refused to restore the policies that worked on every occasion. Every single time people smugglers have leaned against this government, Labor have capitulated. They've yielded and they've softened our borders more and more on every occasion, adopting the policies of the Greens rather than the proven policies of the Coalition. The record level of arrivals to Australia is putting increasing strain on our border protection fleet, and we've seen the reports today that our border protection fleet with the Navy is literally cracking under the pressure. The people smugglers are now stopping our boats rather than the other way around, which is what the Coalition's policies would be designed to do if given the opportunity to implement them. And that, frankly, is what the government can do as we speak today. This government is in a deadlock of their own fabrication. This Prime Minister can restore the policies that worked any day she chooses. It is only her stubborn pride that prevents her from doing exactly that. She can reopen the processing centre on Nauru today. She could have done it 6 weeks ago. She could have done it 6 months ago. She could have done it the day she became Prime Minister and refused to do so. She could reinstore temporary protection visas, denying permanent residency to the people smugglers to sell to their clients. She could give the Navy orders to turn boats back where the circumstances permit, and she could toughen up the assessment process for those who throw their documents away so we wouldn't have to again see the amazing adventures of Captain Emad repeated. The Coalition doesn't need a committee to work out what our policy is. We've had a policy that has worked for over a decade. This is a government that has contracted out its responsibilities as a government. And you know, if you drive around with the window down, sticking your head out asking for directions every 5 minutes, then I think Australians have every reason to believe that this government doesn't know where it's going. And that's what we've seen from this government on this issue, on so many other issues. This is a government that doesn't have a policy. It doesn't know where it's going. We have a policy. They can be restored today. And if the government is not prepared to put those policies back that worked, then maybe the best thing that Angus Houston can recommend is an election.
You say any vote arrival is a policy failure, I gather. But
No, that's what Julia Gillard said. Yeah.
And I gather you agree with that. Is there any particular significance in this being a vote carrying a lot of people, though? Does it make it a bigger policy failure?
Well, every arrival is a failure, as the Prime Minister liked to say. 211 people on vessels of this size, and it is incredibly concerning about the number of people that are now going onto these boats. We've seen that trend increasing over the course of this year as the smugglers' business has ramped up time and again. It only risks further the loss of life, which we have seen. And you know, for years and years, there were those who argued against deterrence policies. They said that the policies of the Howard government should be abolished. Well, they got what they wanted. The Labor Party was elected. They abolished those deterrence policies. Hundreds and hundreds of people have died. Thousands have turned up on boats. Thousands have missed out on protection visas in Australia who have been waiting offshore. That is the consequence of abolishing deterrence policies. And I am frankly amazed that the same voices who called for the abolition of those policies still don't want to see those policies returned today. And the government is amongst those voices.
Chris Bowen saying that he's urging Parliament to find a circuit breaker on this issue. Is that something you're saying you're not committed to?
Well, the government are the government, and it is for them to implement policies that worked, and they could implement the policies they abolished any day they choose. It is the government that has commissioned the expert panel. It is for the government to respond to their recommendations. The government is the ones who asked for this committee. It wasn't the Parliament who resolved this. It wasn't the opposition who called for it. We have a policy, and we know it works. So when the panel makes its recommendations, they will be to the government, and it will be for the government to make a response to those recommendations, and we'll take it from there.
What are you expecting from the expert panel?
I have no expectations. I've met with them just as many others are, and they'll make their recommendations to the government, as it is the government who has commissioned and asked for them to provide a report. This is a Prime Minister who contracted out her job, and I think that was a good indication of just, frankly, where this Prime Minister is when it comes to this issue. Unable to do her own job and deciding to contract it out to others to do it for her.
Sorry, what if there's a need with what is out of the Houston report for some kind of political compromise for you to change your position a little bit? Is that possible?
Well, everyone knows what our policies are. They know they work. I made it very clear when I spoke to the Lowy Institute this week that if the government wishes to continue to put to the Parliament that all human rights protections for offshore processing should be abolished in the Migration Act, if that's what they are asking the Parliament to do, well, that is not something the Coalition will support. And if that question is put to us, then you have the answer. We've been clear about that answer for a very long time. We were clear about it after the High Court decision when they brought legislation into the Parliament to abolish those human rights protections. We were clear about it when Rob Oakeshott tried to do the same thing when he brought his bill to the Parliament. Our bill, my bill in fact, is in the Parliament. It provides for offshore processing in 148 countries. The government could pass that bill when we return to the Parliament next week. I encourage them to do so if that's what they wish to do. But we know that we can put in place our policies immediately. And it's for the government, I think, to make that decision. If they refuse to do so, they are locked up in a policy cul-de-sac of their own creation. Thank you.